Welcome back to For Your Information. I'm Topher Elkins, and here we go again. Look, with everything going on in the world right now, I think we can all agree. It's been really hard to watch the news. No, I'm serious. The news is just unwatchable.
This may be a lot of things, this moment we're living through, but it is definitely not about Black lives. And remember that when they come for you, and at this rate they will. Anyone who's ever been subjected to the rage of the mob knows the feeling. It's like being swarmed by hornets. You cannot think clearly. And the temptation is to panic. But you can't panic. You've got to keep your head and tell the truth.
I'm going to tell you, first of all, he read it. And somebody that wrote this, look, I don't want to get into that. It was on today.
That's why you're here, to talk about the president's address.
Can I finish now?
No, you can't, John.
So what your other guest is suggesting here is not helpful. We need a great partnership between the federal and state government.
Bullshit, people.
Nearly 200 dead, 14,000 who are sick, millions, as you witnessed, who are scared right now. What do you say to Americans who are watching you right now who are scared?
I say that you're a terrible reporter. That's what I say. Go ahead.
You're going to be hosting the White House Correspondents Association's annual dinner. You're going to be the performer in April. Now that dinner's been postponed, like the entire world's been postponed. But if you were up there, what would you be saying about the president and the press right now?
I would just say, the first thing I would make sure is we're all 6 feet away from each other. I mean, we're in a Hilton ballroom, so that first things first, we'd have to make sure. And then I think we could get into the monologue, but I just got to make sure that ballroom's clean first.
That show is called Reliable Sources, and their guest is Hassan Minhaj, the same guy who made it so Trump wouldn't show up to the White House Correspondents' Dinner. So forgive me if I really don't think they have, quote, reliable sources. Why was he on this show? Hassan is who I based my show after. That's like if they went, and now for some insight on the Brexit deal, here's a 20-year-old journalism major who works out of his college basement. Why does it look like he's about to get drone striked, by the way? For a second, think about where you get your information. I bet you like to think you're pretty in the know, right? Cable news, Facebook, Twitter, and WhatsApp. We're living in the golden age of absolute nonsense. Every morning when we pull this out, we think we're in the know. But with every scroll, it's just Donald Trump, people screaming at each other, and whatever the latest scandal is. It's high fructose bullshit, and it's making everyone crazy. Gaffes, memes, commentary about other people's commentary? That's not news. That's just gossip. So, where can we get nutrient-dense, reliable information? Believe it or not, it might be local news. And I definitely don't mean local TV news.
Let's check in on the box in the middle of Broadway, by the Broadway Plaza here. We've seen during the commercial break cars that were trying to get around it, and a couple of near misses there.
We wanted to update you on the status of the box. While that package was airing, a man wearing an orange hoodie walked into the middle of the street, picked up that blue box, and he put it down right there where you see it.
Here's the box. We've been telling you about it for the past half hour.
Oh yeah, our producer just told us perhaps it's a recycling bin.
You're laughing, but that box is wanted in 10 different states for drug trafficking. When I say local news, I mean local newspapers. You know those things that pile up outside your door? They produce the news, the real and trusted kind. And Americans know this. 73% of Americans say they trust their local papers, but only 55% trust national TV news. Local papers aren't just trusted, they are essential to your community. Look what they were doing during the peak of the pandemic. The Tampa Bay Times kept track of local businesses that were open so people could support them. In upstate New York, the Daily News updated locations of vital food services like food pantries and mental health clinics. Sorry to burst your bubble, but you aren't going to get that from the New York Times or CNN. On top of that, local papers are always breaking news stories. Local papers only make about 25% of the country's media outlets, but they produce almost half of all of the original reporting. So, believe it or not, you are getting local news reporting in your Facebook, Twitter feeds, podcasts, and especially cable news. Watch how Rachel Maddow opens this package up.
It started with Sioux Falls, South Dakota, and the single pork processing plant that for a while was the nation's largest coronavirus outbreak, with more than 800 cases of COVID-19 associated with that one plant. There, right? Home to the JBS pork processing plant, where more than 24 employees have also tested positive. Both of those two plants you just saw on the map are now closed for the time being, the one in South Dakota and the one in Minnesota. One of the states that has had trouble is Iowa. Over the weekend, Iowa saw its biggest one-day spike in new cases, driven largely by new positive tests at meatpacking plants.
This must be so frustrating to reporters. You spend all this time reporting a story, then some cringy TV personality turns it into a TED Talk, and they take all the credit? Who would do that? Awkward. But local papers aren't just breaking local stories, they are breaking stories of national importance. And for some reason, there was one area where they always seem to kill it. Exposing sex offenders. No, I'm serious. The Catholic Church, that was the Boston Globe. The former governor of Oregon, that was the Williamette Reek. Jerry Sandusky broke in the Harrisburg Patriot News. The Indianapolis Star broke the news about Subway Jared downloading kiddie porn. And that same paper exposed Larry Nassar, who was the U.S. Olympic volleyball trainer. Well-known urine enthusiast R. Kelly was put on blast by the Chicago Sun-Times. And last, but certainly not least, Jeffrey Epstein, the man who loved kids so much, he was willing to fly with them. Epstein wasn't actually brought down by Ronan Farrow. He was brought down by this woman, Julie K. Brown of the Miami Herald. Her report on Epstein was so thorough, it did more than reveal the truth. Just listen to the attorney that prosecuted Epstein.
Today, we announce the unsealing of sex trafficking charges against Jeffrey Epstein. I will say that we were assisted from some excellent investigative journalism.
I was pretty stunned, along with, I think, everybody else in the journalism world. It's rare that a prosecutor ever admits that a reporter somehow helped them with their investigation. That just doesn't happen.
That's how underappreciated journalists are. She's been investigating a pedophile with a sex island, and the thing that shocks her is basic recognition. Despite the fact that newspapers are well trusted, produce tons of original stories, and keep powerful people in check, they are in serious trouble.
Value of local reporting at a time when newsrooms continue to lose journalists and papers have been closed or gutted. A recent estimate found that since the pandemic began, more than 35,000 news media employees of all kinds in the U.S. have been laid off, furloughed, or faced pay cuts.
That's disappeared. I mean, the things that are essential to you. News is what you don't know that you want to know. The world has changed hugely, and it did it gradually. It went from monopoly to franchise to competitive to
toast.
If you pick up a copy of the Herald these days, the first thing you'll notice is how thin it is. There are virtually no ads. That's because with nothing open, there's no reason to advertise. The Herald and just about every single paper in this country at a crossroads. For further cuts to the Herald, O'Connor says those are being made on a day-by-day basis. In order to keep your local newspaper alive, maybe next time you go to the supermarket, you pick up a newspaper instead of more toilet paper.
Ah, yes, because nothing says I value your work like wiping your ass with it. Look, all kinds of news and media companies have gotten hit hard since 2020. Condé Nast, Vice, The Atlantic, BuzzFeed, 95% of blue checkmark Twitter is in trouble. Soon, you'll have to find out which Disney princess you are the old-fashioned way. Therapy. But local newspapers are an essential service that could completely disappear. That's why we have to talk about who is killing your local paper. So far, a minimum of 30 of them have been closed due to COVID-19. But like so many other things during the pandemic, COVID is just making a problem that already was there so much worse. Since 2004, newspaper revenues have dropped more than 57%. Pre-corona, more than 2,000 papers shut down. Even the paper that took down Epstein, the Miami Herald, is going under. It's the worst thing to happen to South Florida since Al Pacino pretended to be Cuban. Look, if we're going to save local papers, we have to understand why they're in such financial trouble. And you probably know about the first big blow. They used to make bank on advertising. But just like CDs and basic human connection, the internet's screwing that one up too.
Even when news outlets clear the algorithmic hurdles and find you, there's the issue of how the tech giants cut up the cash, the ad revenues. More than 80% of news-related ad revenues end up in the pockets of the gatekeepers, Facebook and Google.
What was the casting call on this part? They definitely we need a male, 20 to 25, coder by day, Boston Marathon bomber by night. Just get me a dude that looks like the Sarnoff brothers. With Facebook and Google sucking up ad dollars, online subscriptions are the only way to make money, and that's only working for the national publications. Except USA Today. They're just chilling over here like, don't worry about us. Our bills are paid by La Quinta Inn. So, it makes sense why local papers are struggling, but there is something that's making their downfall even worse. I'll let Taylor Swift explain this one.
Lately, there's been a new shift that has affected me personally, and that I feel is a potentially harmful force in our industry. And as your resident loud person, I feel the need to bring it up. And that is the unregulated world of private equity.
Admit it, none of you were expecting that. You were deaf ready to go, look, Taylor, we don't need another speech about John Mayer, we get it. But then, plot twist, she goes, capitalism is evil, abolish the police, and guillotine the oligarchs. Thank you. T-Swift is right though. We need to talk about private equity and hedge funds. They are a huge reason why local papers might go extinct because they see their failure as their also opportunity. Here's basically how it works. These companies raise tons of money from rich people and pension funds and then use that money to buy up assets and pay themselves and their investors. In the past few years, private equity firms in the United States have stakes in almost 8,000 companies that directly employ 8.8 million people. But here's the thing, private equity doesn't really care if these companies survive. They only care about making their firms as much money as quickly as possible. They either want to chop up the asset and flip it or bleed it dry. And one of the main ways they do this is through a financial maneuver called a leveraged buyout or an LBO. Here's how it works. The fund buys a company like a newspaper, but instead of paying for it themselves, they take out a huge loan to help buy it. That's the leverage. But here's the f***ed up part. They dump all of that debt on the company while doing everything they can to squeeze the money out of the company. They sell off real estate, they lay off staff, they charge huge management fees. And because of the ways our country's financial laws work, if they go bankrupt, they're not on the hook for anything. It's the financial version of jumping out of an elevator right after you rip ass. But in this case, the fart is so bad it shuts down the whole building. One study found that large companies acquired in LBOs are 10 times more likely to go bankrupt. And the human cost is very real.
Because the first question that I hear from so many members are, how are the returns? But the returns are great, aren't they? How are the returns? And I wasn't sent here to safeguard and protect profit. I was sent here to safeguard and protect people. And we're talking about reining in private equity, which is responsible for wiping out tens of thousands of jobs at Toys R Us alone. And then we're hearing, but what about the companies that made 100 jobs here or 200 jobs there? Toys R Us, 30,000 jobs wiped out. Shopko, 14,000 jobs. Brookstone, David's Bridal, Payless. Not to mention the impacts, the undemocratic impacts on media companies. Splinter, Deadspin, Sports Illustrated, local and regional newspapers. In the last 10 years, private equity is behind 597,000 lost jobs.
Damn, AOC. Private equity killed Toys R Us? I loved that place. But at the same time, screw Brookstone. They were running out of ideas. They were like, hey, come on, do you want a butt plug that syncs with your crock pot? No, I don't want the crock tease. Okay, well, how about this massager that your mom will definitely end up using as a vibrator? Look, given how shitty the deal is, it seems crazy that any company would agree to a leveraged buyout. But most newspapers are so broke, it's often the only option they have left. There's actually a term for investors that go after dying companies like this. They're called vulture funds, and local papers have become the perfect prey. Today, 30% of all newspapers in the country are controlled by just two vulture funds, Fortress Investment Group and Alden Global Capital, both of which are companies that sound like they're trying to kill Superman. These vulture funds have been gutting the American newspaper industry, and Alden is by far the worst.
And Alden Global Capital years ago made the pivot from distressed debt to distressed newsrooms. Now, through a company they own called Digital First Media, the hedge fund has grown to an empire of 97 papers, but none of those newsrooms are happy about it. You wrote a story titled, or a column titled, "What if Gordon Gekko owned newspapers?" or something like that. So tell me about the strategy of this company that is buying up all these papers.
Well, it's a rape and pillage strategy, actually, to be blunt. Newspapers have had problems. They've had to have cutbacks. They don't have advertising the way they did. A lot of them don't have circulation the way they did.
Alden has been called the Grim Reaper of American newspapers and the hedge fund vampire that bleeds newspapers dry. And I don't mean a sexy one like Robert Pattinson, I mean a creepy one like Prince Charles. Alden has sold off newspaper buildings and slashed budgets to boost their own earnings, but for the most part, they're notorious for layoffs. Newspapers from 2012 to 2018, on average, lost 32% of their workforce. And about the same time, only 12 Alden newspapers downsized by 72%. And most of those papers had unions. Just look at what Alden did to the Pottstown Mercury right outside of Philadelphia. In 2012, the Mercury had 73 journalists. Today, they have 8, and they have no building to work in, all because Alden put it up for sale. One Pottstown reporter named Evan Branson now has to cover 25 different news beats. Do you realize how insane that is? That would be like if I had to cover all 5 shows at WNYF by myself, plus any new ones we make along the way. And y'all see my face on this channel way too much in the first place. In 2011, Alden acquired the Denver Post, which has 9 Pulitzer Prizes. Despite that, Alden hit them with so many layoffs, they eventually hit back.
Journalists accustomed to asking the questions were answering them today about why they felt so strongly that they would walk out of the Denver Post newsroom to beg their hedge fund owner to stop strip mining that paper or sell it to someone who cares.
Don't let the vultures get you down.
My message today is we want public support, and we need public support, and we need pressure on our owners, because there's an understanding that if they don't sell the newspaper, we don't have long to live.
Anything like what Alden is doing to the Post and other newspapers that it owns across the country, nearly 200 newspapers, cutting at 2 to 3 times the rate of the industry. Yes. Ladies and gentlemen, please have the lead.
What I'm going to do with it? What I'm going to do with it?
Ladies and gentlemen, the building has requested you leave. Failing to do so will be considered trespass. Please exit now. All these locals got to go.
They won't even accept the petitions. They threw us out of the building.
Maybe it's because you look like you're bringing them a box of donuts from Staples. Make no mistake, racking up debt, selling off assets, and laying off staff, these aren't brilliant business tactics. It's just basic stuff Alden does to pay themselves more, and it works. This is Alden's profit margins around the country now. For reference, the New York Times, which has been killing it recently, had a 10% margin last year. All of those layoffs in Denver gave Alden a 19% profit margin in Colorado. And those layoffs in Pottstown, that made the region 30% profit margin. These are college textbook margins. And yeah, no, I'm still not okay with all the bullshit you put me through. Screw you, McGraw-Hill. And if you're wondering who would ransack local papers to make a quick buck, look at Alden's CEO, Randall Smith. But technically, we're not allowed to show you a picture of him because I legally can't use the one photo of him on the internet. And truthfully, I feel like it's because he owns the picture. So instead, here's a political cartoon of him that's actually pretty accurate. So trust me when I tell you he looks like a 78-year-old E.T. in whiteface, because I'm sure he doesn't mind.
Problem is,
Alden Capital has shown absolutely no indication that they have any conscience at all. They are just wringing every penny they can out of the Denver Post. They don't care. Randall Smith, the owner, has, 17 mansions in Palm Beach. I'm sure he can pay for one or two more by the time he is done taking millions out of the Denver Post.
Now, wait a second. Cut him some slack. Randall Smith did not buy 17 mansions in Palm Beach. That being said, he did buy 16 mansions in Palm Beach. Smith buys mansions like they're socks. You know, you gotta have extras in case you lose some in the wash, which ironically is what rich people in Florida just happen to call hurricanes. OBX vibes out there, I swear to God. I wish I could say more about Randall Smith, but he's so damn secretive. So it's convenient that he is killing local papers because that is who would look into him if he had something to hide. Now, I'm not a conspiracy theorist, but we know Randall Smith buys up local papers, which are very good at exposing pedophiles. Then he uses that money to buy 16 mansions in South Florida, one of which is on Jungle Road, which just so happens to be a short walk up to a house that is owned by well-known pedo Jeffrey Epstein. This is 100% true, so just stick with me. Make no mistake, I'm definitely not saying Randall Smith is a pedophile, or I'm definitely not saying that he wants to protect pedophiles. See, this graphic is not true. Don't you dare screen grab this. Look, we need to face the fact that our local papers could disappear, and if they do, it's going to hurt all of our communities.
We're going to be dumber. And our politicians are going to be able to get away with stuff that they didn't used to get away with.
Are you sure that hasn't already happened? Look, what else can you enlighten me on, Topps brand Anderson Cooper?
We're not going to know as much about each other and our neighbors and the people who live across town and people who aren't like ourselves. And nobody's going to be rooting out the corruption that's still such a part of political and business life. Yeah. You know, we're all poorer for it.
All right, real talk. I don't know if I want to know more about my neighbor. Dorm rooms have very thin walls, and I would love to see Alexis next door without knowing that there is more than just one person in her life that she happens to call daddy. These problems are already happening all over. Even before COVID, there are 225 counties in the country without a single local paper, and almost half of the counties in the country only have one. These areas are called news deserts. Like food deserts, except it's not that they don't have apples, they just have no idea what the hell's going on. So it's easy for people to get away with shit. Look at Bell, California, which hasn't had a newspaper since early 2000s. In 2005, city officials created a ballot measure that eliminated their own salary caps, but hardly anyone knew that there was a vote because there wasn't a local paper. The measure passed, and the next thing you know, the police chief went from making a little over $200,000 in Glendale to over $450,000 in Bell. And the city manager went from making $300,000 to almost $700,000. Those are the highest salaries of any public official in the country at any level of government, including the President of the United States. It took 5 years for anyone to uncover this, and if they happened to have a local paper, they probably would have caught this.
In an email, former police chief Randy Adams wrote Assistant City Manager Angela Spaccia, "I am looking forward to seeing you and taking all of Bell's money. Okay, just a share of it." Spaccia replies, "Lots of laughs. Well, you can take your share of the pie just like us. We will all get fat together."
LOL? Lots of laughs? What the f?
She goes on, "Pigs get fat, hogs get slaughtered. So as long as we're not hogs, all is well."
Hey, at least she called the police chief a pig. That's kind of cool. Corruption like this makes it obvious why we need the news to be reporting on what local governments are doing. But with years of cuts, only 30% of daily newspapers have someone covering the State House. Did that Malaysian plane end up at the State House? Probably not, but we have no real way of knowing. And when good journalism disappears, you know what's going to fill that hole? Russian bots and other shit like this.
His site is called Truth Examiner, and it caters to liberals with headlines like this designed to entice clicks on stories with little substance.
They want like 250 word, like little hit 'em and go. It's like basically like a coke addict. Every hour, he just needs to like, get that little dopamine rush. Like a fan on the conservative side or the liberal side needs to take out their phone, look at it. Oh, Trump sucks. Trump sucks so bad. All right, I'm done. And then, right? Like that's it. That's it.
People don't care about the facts.
Yeah, of course. People don't care about facts. Take it to the bank.
That just turned into the world's douchiest commercial. Hey bro, wanna make big bucks shitting on reality? Hell yeah bro, lie your ass off, get people heated, then woo, take it to the bank. Luckily, Facebook took down Truth Examiner for violating spam policies, but newsfeeds are still packed with all kinds of insane lies. Trump is now trying to get Mike Pence impeached? That was viewed almost 11 million times. What's next? We're gonna find out Steve Harvey is the head of QAnon? And of course, lies about COVID are going viral. Sorry about that one. Just look at this clip from a 26-minute video called Plandemic, which claims the coronavirus was planned.
A slew of COVID-19 misinformation has been going viral on social media. One video making the rounds is called Plandemic. It features a former scientist claiming this coronavirus did not occur naturally. Far from it.
It's very clear this virus was manipulated. This family of viruses was manipulated and studied in a laboratory where the animals were taken into the laboratory. And this is what was released, whether deliberate or not. That cannot be naturally occurring.
I don't know what's creepier, the conspiracy theory itself or her unwillingness to blink. Before Facebook took it down, it got 8 million views. Look at how quick lies can spread on Facebook. This is the number of likes, shares, and comments about the Office reunion. Now here's Plandemic. I don't know what's more insane, that Facebook didn't act faster or that 8 million people watched a 26-minute video. And yes, I'm including this show. Why are you still here? Look, if we don't want a steady diet of high fructose BS, we need strong local papers. But where's the best place to start? Especially if you're a college student. Look, almost all colleges have their own newspaper, and almost all of them cover stories that are important to either campus or your surrounding community. And my college is no different.
My name is Chloe Kowalik, and I'm the news section editor of The Leader.
All right, so for what does the college paper cover in terms of the area and college itself?
We mostly talk about campus stuff and stuff that's happening around the area. So anything that affects college kids, that's what we try to focus on. So we have news, life and arts, opinion, scallion, and sports.
How does it feel knowing that a paper industry is one that's not really represented well in the country, and obviously that's something you're in charge of and for the club?
Yeah, it very much depends on what community you're looking at. A lot of places can only have access to paper because they don't have access to digital formatting. So for them it's very important to keep the newspapers alive. But I also kind of am a little crushed seeing people reading 2-minute long BuzzFeed articles online and not seeing actual good content, so.
Oh, so you're telling me that you don't try to choose what Disney princess you are on BuzzFeed?
No, I've never done that before.
If you had to guess, what would it be?
Wow, probably Belle because of the reading. What about you? What
Disney princess would I be? Ooh.
Yeah, this is important. I need to know.
Okay, I think I would be, I don't know. I'm not a redhead, but I feel like I'd be Ariel,
I can see it. I can see it.
Exactly, okay. So, all right, so why is it called The Leader? Leader in what? Honestly, have you questioned it?
I really haven't thought about that
Yeah,
until you
why,
brought it
please,
up to me.
Why? The Leader. That's a very strong name for a paper, but
So do you want to know something kind of crazy?
Sure.
So back in the day when Fredonia was called Fredonia Normal School, the Leader it's been around since the 1800s. It used to be called the Normal Leader. So I'm glad we've, you know, kind of accelerated. Now we're just like the leader, not normal. We're not basic anymore. We're very cool.
Oh, so you're not basic?
We're not basic at all. We're very cool.
Would you consider any of your stories basic?
No.
Okay.
Not at all.
Not at all?
No, not
okay,
one.
would you consider yourself basic?
Maybe a little bit.
Maybe a little bit?
Maybe
Okay.
a little bit.
All right, so you go to, I do see you at Starbucks every day, so maybe
Yeah, you didn't need to call me out like that.
Is
But okay.
Is it a basic white girl drink?
What do you classify as basic?
What's your
like an
go-to-
iced coffee? Because
what's your go-to drink at Starbucks?
Iced apple crisp macchiato. Yeah, okay, we're there. We're there.
I heard the word macchiato. That's pretty.
Yeah, okay, that's fair.
That's fair. So, what's the worst thing you've ever seen someone do with the paper? Like a copy of like the leader. Have you ever seen anyone just like kind of like take it and just like toss it, or like what's the funniest thing like you've seen like personally like one of the papers?
I've never seen anyone do anything. Okay, so there's a funny. You want a funny thing? I'll give you a funny thing. So, do you know the T-Rex that's in the Science Center?
Yeah.
People have been putting, you know, him holding the newspapers. There's a skeleton somewhere on campus that's holding a newspaper. So they're kind of just in like really weird places, but I mean, if that's what's getting people to see them, I'm all for it.
All right. Okay, so last serious one. I'll give you one more serious one.
Okay.
What would you suggest for people that want to support either papers like for a college or just in general?
Honestly, just reading it and giving feedback to the editors, you can let them know if you want something to be covered, like a major issue that's happening. Like, for example, the water crisis in Fredonia that's been going on for a while. That's something that people need to have information about, and paper is a great way to do that. So kind of just reaching out and interacting with your local newspaper is a great way to get involved.
Shout out to Chloe for letting me give her probably the worst interview of her life. We need to treat newspapers like the essential services they are, like healthcare, teachers, or firefighters, or your neighbor's Wi-Fi. With everything going on in the country right now, from the pandemic to protests, we cannot let local papers die. And whether it's funding them from tax money, turning them into nonprofits, or just straight up supporting them financially,